Hey guys, you're back with Steph and Dennis, and today we're talking about a topic that we actually discuss all the time with each other, but we haven't talked about too much on the channel yet, which is all about real estate. Specifically today about how real estate and the real estate market has changed. We're gonna reference in downtown Toronto where we live, but kind of just in general with the craziness that was 2020 and everything to do with the pandemic. Our thoughts on renting versus buying and the changes that we've seen, how that might impact our future living plans as well, and everything like that. So if you're interested in this type of topic and videos like this, let us know down below. And before we get into it, give us a like and let's get started.
Okay, so to kick things off, hopefully it's safe to say that the two main cities that a lot of people know of within Canada are Toronto and Vancouver. Now, although a lot of people have heard of these cities, what a lot of people don't know is just how expensive they are. For example, even when Graham Stephan reacted to our Millennial Money video, he pointed out just how expensive Vancouver is, but I don't actually think that he even realizes just how crazy the Toronto real estate market is, even in comparison to Vancouver. You know, for anyone who's out there, or for anyone who grew up in a major city or is growing up in a major city, it's a really sad feeling when you realize that you probably won't be able to afford a home in the city that you grew up in because of the cost of living. So last month, UBS, a Swiss bank, released their annual report, and it basically looks at a bunch of the different cities across the globe, and it analyzes which cities happen to be in a bubble based on their housing market. So to no one's surprise, of course, Toronto and Vancouver are on this report. And what's actually interesting is that Toronto is in the bubble risk category for the third consecutive year. Toronto's even surpassed cities like Hong Kong, Paris, and Amsterdam, which is crazy. So on the flip side, or if we go over to Vancouver, they've actually been downgraded, so they're no longer in the bubble risk category, but they're still in the overvalued category. You know, to give you a Toronto example, basically what we've seen here is that there's such a high demand for homes, and there's so many big investors as well that just come in and are willing to just slosh money around, basically. So even though supply is limited, people are still willing to get into the market and, you know, buy whichever home they're looking for. What's even crazier is that even though we're in the midst of a pandemic, home prices here in Toronto are way up. And get this, here in Toronto, home purchases are up so high that this August beat out what last August's sales were. The average home price in the city of Toronto this past September was just over $1 million. And if we look at the greater Toronto area, it was just under $1 million. Like, that's crazy. You know, I guess I should dial that back a bit because this might not actually sound crazy depending on where you live. But even with that being said, here in Toronto, there are sheds, literally sheds. And yes, I said sheds, being sold for $800,000 over asking. Believe it or not, and I'll throw it up on the screen, but there was a shed, the equivalent of a shed, that was put on the market for $1 million and it sold for $1.8 million. And if you still aren't sold on just how crazy the Toronto real estate market is, I've got people that I know personally at work who've put in offers to homes and they don't get them because there's so many offers coming in, there's so many bidding wars that they go for, you know, 200 over asking, 300 over asking, just crazy. But anyways, we'll dive deeper as we get into our actual personal experience from us living here in Toronto.
Okay, so now that you know all about the real estate market here in Toronto, we wanted to share a few of our actual thoughts on living here in Toronto. For anyone who hasn't heard us talk about it before, or if you're new here, Dan actually grew up in Toronto in the GTA area. I didn't, I was a little bit outside of that, kind of more in the countryside. And then we both went to school in Ottawa, the capital of Canada, where we met, and then we moved back to Toronto, living downtown where we've lived for the past 2.5 years now. So overall, the short and sweet answer is that we love living here in Toronto. Dan always has since I first met him when we were back in Ottawa. He always mentioned how he wanted to come back to Toronto. And for me, I just really love living in the city. I feel like if you grow up outside of a city, like in the countryside, you either want to stay there or you're obsessed with the city, and I'm the second of those two. I really like being so close to everything. Pretty much everything we need is within a walking distance, which is great. We love the actual neighborhood we live in too. I like the fact that I can look outside, even if I look out right now, and see people walking around, walking with their dogs. So many great coffee shops and restaurants in a pre and hopefully post-COVID world. Overall, we just really enjoy being downtown and being in the city. But on the other hand, one of the biggest downsides and cons to living, again, specifically downtown Toronto too, but pretty much anywhere in Toronto and the GTA, is the cost and how expensive it is, specifically when it comes to real estate and housing costs. I would actually say we have a bit of a steal when it comes to the cost of our current condo. It's only 400 square feet. You've probably seen it before, so it's small, but our total cost is $1,850 per month, which we get to split in half, so $925 each, which does equate to only about 25 to 30% of our take-home monthly salary, which is the goal. You wouldn't go too much higher than that ideally. And a big reason that we actually have that cost and are able to keep it at that level is because we started at the place that we're renting right now back in 2018, so about 2.5 years ago when we first moved to Toronto. This is still the first and only only place we've lived in here together. That was the price that we've had, and it stayed the same since then, luckily for us. And pre-pandemic, anytime I did look at the cost of units that were maybe just slightly bigger than ours, if we were to ever move, it would just be to have a little bit more space. It is a little bit of a tight squeeze in here, totally fine. But whenever I have looked around, to actually get that tiniest bit of more space, the jump in price is huge. A lot of comparable one bedrooms in similar areas or in the downtown area are at least $2,400 per month, which might not seem too crazy of a jump, but it really is when you add hundreds of dollars per month to your rent costs. The only real financial pros that I can think of living in the city, and they mostly have to do with the fact that we live together, is that we do split the cost of housing in half for the two of us, and we can do so with a one bedroom. Also, transportation costs are limited. That's a really nice thing, at least from my perspective. We can walk pretty much everywhere we need to go, or take public transit, which we haven't even been doing in this pandemic world. Everything we actually need is within a walking distance. But on the other hand, if we weren't living together, we could maybe technically still afford to live where we live, but our savings or debt repayment would be extremely limited in that case. So moral of the story is, although we really love living here, we can see ourselves here for at least the near future too, it definitely is an ongoing conversation. And if we're gonna stay here in downtown Toronto long term, especially as we look in the future to potentially buy, to start investing in real estate and everything like that, which I'm gonna touch on a little bit more in a minute, but first let's hear more from Den.
So I think a really good question to ask and answer is whether COVID has actually killed or destroyed real estate markets in cities like Toronto or other major cities across, the globe. Basically, who's winning and who is losing? Well, given the fact that we actually live in a condo here in downtown Toronto, I think it's only fitting that we actually discuss that side of things and some of the changes that have come about for anyone who's looking to rent or for anyone who's currently renting. Basically, we are in a renter's market. And for anyone who does not know what that means, you, the person who's looking to rent or who's currently renting, you technically hold the power. From cities like San Francisco, Manhattan, Toronto, Vancouver, what we've seen is that rents are going down and vacancies are going up. Basically, this sucks for landlords here in Toronto, but at the same time, for years, they've been enjoying the climbing rents and they've been enjoying a market where there's so little properties on the market, so supply is so low that they can reject someone because there's gonna be 10 other people lining up at their doors to rent from them. What's also interesting is that due to the pandemic, tourism has obviously gone down no matter where you are, right? So a lot of short-term rentals, so for example, Airbnbs, they've been converted into long-term rentals. So that brings up more supply into the market. And also for anyone who lives in a city like Toronto or New York, where condos are always going up, there's all this construction, all these buildings, you do also have to consider all the buildings that were just completed and just finished and are now also on the market with investors looking to get those rented out as well. So you have this huge influx of supply that previously, remember, wasn't there before. Now that covers the renting side of things, but what about anyone who's trying to buy or sell their condo? Well, unfortunately, small condos have turned out to be the biggest losers over the past few months. And when I say tiny or small condos, I mean condos that are less than 500 square feet. So basically a condo like ours. Basically with COVID, there's been two shifts that they've noticed in what people actually want. One, surprise, surprise, people want more space. And two, people are looking for more value from their homes, which they can get if they leave the downtown cores, right? What's funny is that if you look at the statistics, investors pre-COVID loved buying up those units that were less than 500 square feet. Basically, they were the only available units that you could get for under $500,000 in the city of Toronto, which is also crazy, right? Pre-COVID, if you could get your hands on one of those units and grab them for, less than 500K, you had the benefit of being able to charge such high rents, which basically made it a money-making machine, right? Like we mentioned before, basically what's happening in the rental market with all these units coming up and there being this influx of supply, it's actually affecting, on the flip side, anyone who's trying to sell their place or anyone who's trying to buy. People aren't incentivized to buy them anymore because you can't charge those high rents, and then people are having trouble selling them because there's so many people trying to sell theirs, right? So there's such an influx on the market on both sides, essentially. Even if we think about it from a personal perspective, now that work from home is becoming sort of more the norm and in our daily routines and schedules, this whole idea of living in a 400 square foot apartment where you can't even access your building amenities, no pools, no gyms, no patios for barbecuing, it makes living downtown and living in one of these units less and less attractive, in my opinion. Now, overall, we're not saying that demand has completely diminished for a lot of these units, but basically what we're seeing is people starting to ask themselves, why am I gonna pay $600,000 for a 400 square foot closet, right? Like, it just doesn't add up.
Okay, so I'm back and in a different spot.
Guys, the sun is leaving us quicker. We just had daylight savings day today and we're running out of time. So I'm gonna wrap it up quickly talking about the fun stuff, what our thoughts are, specifically Den and I, on renting versus buying, if we'll be moving anytime soon with these changes we're seeing. So we did wanna know, and we're curious, if any of you would be interested in maybe seeing Den and I look at some of the different smaller apartment units and condos here in downtown Toronto. Would you be interested in us kind of doing some tours and actually seeing visually what we would get for these prices and how much the prices have gone down and up and all of those things? So if you're interested in something like that, let us know in the comments below and we'll see if we can make that happen safely. Also, we do see ourselves just in general continuing to rent for at least the short-term future. On our end, one of the plus sides is that it does allow you to have a looser cash flow. So we'll have more money that we continue to save up instead of just being able to barely afford a place if we were to buy right now or in the very near future. So our plan is to continue to rent and get as low as prices as we can, even if that means we do have to end up continuing to sacrifice some space. And then in the future, we'll be working towards saving up for a down payment because we are very interested in real estate investing overall.
Alright guys, I hope that you enjoyed this video. We hope that you took away some good, useful information. We tried to make it more relatable, more, down to earth, as opposed to a bunch of terms and a bunch of things that, a lot of people just don't understand, right? We haven't necessarily dived too deep when it comes to real estate, but we will be diving more in the future. But yeah, if you like the video, make sure you do comment down below. Let us know your thoughts, right? Make sure you like the video as well. Very key. And if you haven't checked out some of our other videos on money, on investing, that sort of thing, make sure you check them out next door. We will be back. You already know what it is. Next week, same time, same place. Let's get it.